Hey guys, so I know this may sound crazy, but it's heavy. I bought a server. Well, technically it's not a real server. It's an ATX server. So it's a 2U server. You can see that it's 2U, and it fits a regular ATX power supply back here. I'll show you the backside probably later, and it fits a standard ATX motherboard. So I'll put a computer into this. So let me tell you the story of this. Here's the stuff that will go in here. This is a standard ATX power supply, 500 watts I think. This is the main piece of the show. I'll put the specs on screen because I don't know them by heart. This is an ATX motherboard obviously, and it was in a desktop computer. In fact, fun story, it was in my grandfather's desktop computer, and I just built him a new computer. Before anyone asks, my grandfather's actually really tech savvy, so he wouldn't have any problem with that. He asked me to get him a new computer, and so I took his old one, and we're gonna put this into this. Let's see how it goes. I've never done this kind of video, but hopefully you'll enjoy. You may be wondering why I'm sitting on the floor and stuff, and the reason is that literally no table in the entire house is large enough to do computer work on, so I just do computer work on my floor. Also, I won't be wearing an ESTD strap, a shock anti-shock strap, because I don't have it, and so please don't add me. Get back into real time for the peel. Ooh, yeah. Peel 10 out of 10, definitely 10 out of 10. Do you even peel, bro? Server grade peel is harder than desktop consumer grade peel. Now that I've completely peeled the thing, let's look at some of the specs, I don't know, some of the layout. This is basically ATX. I don't know what these things in the fronts are for. And this is sort of your front panel, and it will probably have standard connectors. This is the fan duct. In fact, I'll just remove that for you. These are dust filters. I don't know if you can see them. Yeah, that's pretty visible. And if we turn the case around, and we have of course the fan duct for the power supply, your standard ATX opening, I/O shield, and this is whatever, and these are PCIe half-height base, which I won't use. For storage, I'll be using some standard SSDs. Screws are out. Let's remove this, and as you can see, there's, oh, I think that's a protector, right? So we can put that there and protect the motherboard against shorting out on the bottom aluminum piece. That's very nice. Of course, as I said, this is the front I/O and the fans. Motherboard goes here, standard ATX stuff, and power supply goes back there. All of the drives should go in the front here, I think. And I'm hoping that these will just be standard SSD sized mount, so I can just mount them from the back. I have a bunch of screws in this package that came with the motherboard. Use your normal PC building common sense when assembling this. I think this is a thermocouple, so a temperature sensor. Or it's just standard in server hardware, I don't know. Well, we have a Molex connector here. Good thing that power supply has Molex connectors. So as you probably saw on the time lapse there, I removed essentially everything. The front panel, handles, and drive cages. Don't even know if I'll put them back because I don't plan to put any hard drives in here. I just plan to use it. First of all, a single SSD and probably nothing else. Maybe later if I upgrade this to use as a storage server, I could do that. I'll just put in the motherboard, do some power testing. The motherboard is now in, and I forgot to put in the I/O front panel. Great stuff. At least like all of this is very screwable and I can just remove it. I've connected all of the other stuff, and the CPU power supply is a bit sketchy, but that's the longest cable I have. I didn't buy this power supply. I at this power supply and I'm gonna use it. Okay, that's a build system, essentially. And in theory, let's just switch on the power supply. No sparks so far. Let's just see. Of course, there is nothing connected here, so in theory we should just see the fan spinning and the BIOS should go into standby mode because there is nothing to boot from. That is an incredibly good sign. That is also a good or a bad sign, depending on how you count it, because these fans are freaking loud. And as I would expect, the fan control panel doesn't turn on because, as I said, I'm going to turn this off again. These are voltage controls. These are 3-pin headers. No PWM. Or maybe I'll just put all of the fan cables back and use the internal controller. I think I'll get a monitor hooked up to this. Maybe get into the BIOS. We'll see. So bad news is I didn't find the screen, the monitor, whatever. Good news is I just have my graphics tablet and keyboard here. Let's turn the power supply back on. We should be able to get this thing powered. Yes, we can. Okay, it shouldn't have any signal right now. And let's just hope that this computer has a graphics card. Yes, it works. Okay, after fiddling like for 15 minutes with fan configurations and stuff, it simply seems like these server fans don't really accept any voltage control thing. They will just run at full speed all the time. And so you can see that I've put manual fan speed to 50%, and it tells me that that's actually correct, that the fan is currently running at like 3,400 RPM, which is insane. Just a second. Oh crap, that was scary. If I turn that up to 100%, we can see that there's absolutely no change in the fan RPM. It's always hovering between 3,400 and 3,500. And also the system fan 2, which is plugged in at the front here, or could be plugged in at the front here, it doesn't show up in the menu. So I don't know what's wrong with the BIOS. Maybe it's a BIOS problem, and I'll try to do an update later. But yeah, these fans are just going crazy, absolutely crazy. And I'll put back all of the cables of the built-in fan controller now, and I'll see if that helps anything. Also, just a neat thing, by the way, I just noticed that this is actually a K processor, so it's unlocked, as you can read here. That'll mean that I'll probably overclock this thing, because with this amount of fan speed I can do anything. Fun thing again, I don't know if this is normal, but I can't overclock the CPU, at least not with this motherboard. It's probably Intel move that you can't overclock the K CPUs on certain motherboards because, well, whatever. Anyways, I can literally adjust every single parameter of the DRAM timing, but I can't adjust the CPU overclock, which is completely backwards and ridiculous. Okay, well, I don't know how this fan controller works, but it does work. So it essentially prevents the fans from going all wee. So I actually was successful and plugged them in correctly into fan 1 and fan 2. I was worrying that that wasn't the thing that I was plugging into, but if I press set, I can change this probably. CF. Oh, that's just degrees in Fahrenheit. Okay. So if I press set again, I'm just switching between fans. Okay. Let's go back to fan 2 and maybe press the... Oh, now it's going up to 40 degrees. 41, 42. Okay, so 30 degrees is the lower limit, I think. So I probably need to put the temperature gauge into the computer heatsink, because I know from looking at the BIOS just here that CPU is at 50 degrees constantly, which appears to be a lot. Maybe I'm like biased because my computer has a really good thermal solution and it's like sitting at below 40 most of the time. So after waiting a couple of minutes, it seems like, yeah, there's just a on-off switch in this fan controller here. So essentially I've now put the thermocouple into the heatsink of the CPU in the hopes that it will correctly gauge how hot the CPU is, and it's currently sitting at like 29 degrees exactly. So every time it ticks over to 30 degrees, these fans spin up for usually 10 seconds and then turn off, but they're like just on off. That's what I'm talking about. It's just on off. Like, the thing I can do obviously is put in low noise things here. I'll probably do that. Like, they came with my Noctua fans and I don't use them, so I'll just put them in here. But yeah, that's like the thermal performance. And of course, once we close that off here, we'll have... Thanks, fans! Okay, and you know what? I'm just gonna turn this off. And once we close this off here, we'll have worse airflow from the cooler here, because that is setting very much on top, and I don't know if this is even going to work out. Maybe I'll have to drill a hole in the top plate here. I'm going to boot up my main computer now and do a BIOS update. Like download the BIOS and flash the new BIOS on, maybe look back into the manual. After prying around at the CPU cooler for the last minute, I noticed that because I never installed an Intel stock cooler before, it wasn't properly fastened on, so it was just sliding around on the CPU, which was scary. Let's test the thermals again. Oh, and I should probably plug in the CPU fan before I do that. Oh, well, that made a difference. That's 10 degrees less. Okay, so several hours later, I've tried a bunch of things, updated the BIOS. It doesn't overclock. This is an H chipset, and that apparently doesn't overclock. The main problem that I have right now is actually the temperatures, so cooling. This fan doesn't really get good air if I close the lid. I observed the temperatures going up to back to 50 or something. Options that I have is I have this other old fan. Shouldn't really matter because it's a fan, it works. And I'll try and put it maybe somewhere here, or even if I manage to fit it, I think I'll fit it here and connect it to this fan controller here. Like, just removing the cooler and letting the airflow from the front fans cool it isn't enough. It will rise very quickly, the temperature. Guess what just arrived in the mail? Let's open this up. Here we go. Of course, I know, guys, what is actually in here. That's very nice. And this is the SSD that we'll be using. I didn't expect that to arrive until tomorrow, but apparently it did. That's great. So first, of course, I haven't checked the thermals. You've probably seen the time lapse just now. We can go start putting some operating systems on here. Okay, after hacking away at this for another hour or so, I don't know, I've got it to this point. Essentially, I'm running both of these front fans with a Noctua half-speed low noise adapter that I still have from my PC case fans, and the current temperatures is sitting at 47 degrees and climbing. So I have an additional fan back here, which is zip tied because I'm very ghetto, and that's currently not running, but now I can open it because that was my thermal testing. The thermals will immediately improve, and so these two use a Noctua low noise adapter, and this one is currently, as you can see here, is not plugged in, but I could also plug it into the motherboard if I want to. That would actually be a good idea. Let's just quickly plug that into the motherboard, because I think Yeah, you can hear it's the loudest fan in the entire system, but it helps a lot by pulling away from the CPU. So that was pretty painless. I just put in the SSD back here, and I flashed a Debian install onto this USB stick. And the reasoning for Debian is simply because I know how to use it. I don't plan to use anything special, whatever. Anyways, and it seems to just boot right up. That's great. Okay, so unfortunately I can't show you the screen right now because there's sensitive information on it, but suffice it to say, the installation of Debian 10.9, I believe, worked successfully. This thing now runs Linux on this 1/4 terabyte hard drive, and that is essentially everything I wanted to show you today. Put in a time lapse of me assembling all of this back together, and I just wanted to share this quick process and how easy it is to get something like this up and running. Like, the installation isn't at all complicated. You don't need to have a lot of technical skills. And what I was doing here was advanced optimization, I would say, of airflow and stuff. And all of that is skills you can get from regular PC building. And just, there are tons of resources online. It's a very good idea to use older desktop hardware for your personal servers, whatever you're going to use them for. So yeah, that's all for today.